Hello to everyone in the internet. I am Nathan of Washington, and you are watching The Une-Globalist. It is currently November 29th, and this is your honest, independent news. Alright. Jeff Flake was blocked from pushing legislation to save Mueller from Trump recently. Flake was talking about how the forced resignment of Jeff Sessions and the oversight of the Mueller probe by Rod Rosenstein and of course Matthew Whitaker as well. These were all signs that were cause for alarm, according to him. Because Trump, would, at least by appearance, was acting against the Mueller probe, which would make him look guilty. And of course, principally that is true, but people are individuals, so that's not always true. In fact, if I suspect anyone of being dirty, it's Flake. Flake is actually the perfect name for this guy, because he is a huge flake. This was just him flaking a desperate move to save Mueller from Trump because he was part of the impeach Trump crew. He was part of those folks that wanted to impeach Trump and initially pushed that movement. Jeff Flake is in bed with the Democrats who are butthurt over losing the presidency to Trump. And this is what this has been. This has just been 2+ years of constant, non-stop butthurt. That's all it's been. What's even more amazing, and simply perfect, was Senator Mike Lee of Utah blocking the legislation, blocking Jeff Flake's proposal. Jeff gets up to the stand, and he's probably all like, Trump forcing the resignation of Jeff Sessions and Mueller oversight by Rod Rosenstein and Matthew Whitaker was cause for alarm. I want you to put a stop to this. Mike Lee. No. Jeff Flake like, okay, I tried. So he thinks oversight counts as criminal interference and obstruction of justice. Oversight. What's wrong with looking into something to make sure that's being conducted properly, not being mishandled or used as a weapon? I think Trump had that right. Flake is a flaky guy. That's why it's the perfect name. Trying to save Mueller, but Mueller was doomed from the start. Absolutely. Yeah, he just wanted to have dirt on Trump, because they don't like him. And why? Because they see him as the enemy. Trump has done nothing wrong. He did not collude with Russia. He won the election fair and square, and this is just more Democrat butthurt. Always was. This was a desperate move to try and save something that ultimately simply would never work in the first place. And still on the note of Trump, using presidential pardon power to save his friends? Is that accusation true as well? Well, I'll tell you what, presidential pardons are always controversial. Like, remember when Ford pardoned Nixon? Because the investigation was basically tearing America apart. It was brutal, it was very divisionary, it was basically tearing the country in half. But it always comes with a certain measure of controversy. Always. Regardless for the reason. And let's be honest here. this too could easily be Democratic butthurt. The Mueller probe was complete BS. There was no collusion with Russia. There is no evidence. When that probe ends and then the data is collected and we see the data, it's going to show you that exactly. I'm just predicting that right now. There will be nothing in there. No reason. They just wanted to imply that because, you know, they wanted something to impeach him so they could replace him with a Democrat. That's all it is. They just want to replace Trump with one of their guys. They didn't want the Republicans to win. And technically, he didn't say he was going to use his pardon power to, quote, save his friends. You know, to get his former lawyer. Because this was concerning his former lawyer, Michael Cohen. Trying to get Cohen, trying to pardon Cohen as he's been implicated in the Mueller probe. But all Trump said was that presidential pardon was not off the table, which was not a significant statement in either direction, whether he was going to pardon Cohen or not. In other words, they're just assuming that he's going to start using presidential pardons to get all his friends off the hook. He's not abusing his power. He hasn't even pardoned anyone yet. They're jumping the gun here. The Dems, on the other hand, are abusing their power for investigating Trump at every turn to try and prevent him from doing his job. I say Trump should just make good on his threat and just shut down the government. Just shut it down to make the Dems and the Never Trump Republicans behave. Force them to behave by shutting down the government. They don't get paychecks, they don't get to do anything. I think he should just make good on it. He didn't say he was actually going to pardon Cohen. He just said it wasn't off the table, meaning it was still a possibility, not a guarantee that he was going to do it. He is so contrary to their claim. He is not actually going to be, you know, getting all his buddies off the hook just by using his presidential pardon power. He is not using his PPP to cover his own ass. That is a lie. Moving on. This news report's very Trumpy. Trump pulls out of nuclear arms control meeting with Vladimir Putin due to his handling of the situation with Ukraine. I.e. being he found 3 Ukraine naval vessels, maybe sailing a little too close to the Russian waters, so he captures them and holds the crews, takes the crews, seizes the ships, which Ukraine basically raises a red flag to that one. Putin himself is risking war with Ukraine, and it's making everyone a little hot under the collar, a little sweating over the possibilities. So I'd say Putin may have crossed the line on this one and may cause an international war. German police recently raided Deutsche Bank looking for 2 individuals who are alleged to have helped set up offshore money laundering operations. Well, I mean, yeah, when you get a big central bank, like, say, the Federal Reserve or the Deutsche Bank, of course you're going to get things, you know, you're going to cause shit to happen. You're going to see stuff like that from big central banks. I wouldn't be surprised if you investigated into the Federal Reserve and found something very similar. Big banks, period, whether it be the German Deutsche Bank, whether it be the American Federal Reserve, or what have you. I think if you investigate any of these big, powerful banks, that is what you're going to find. At least in most of them, you will find that, with few exceptions. Moving on. The aforementioned Michael Cohen is going to have to plead guilty to lying to the Mueller investigation about not continuing to build the Trump Tower in Moscow, Russia. Even though further attempts were made, he said they stopped just prior to Trump's being sworn in, but further attempts were in fact made. And while this seems pretty damning, that doesn't prove anything. Wanting to build a Trump Tower in Russia, I don't see how that's supposed to in some way preclude that he then somehow colluded with Russia to get their help for him to win the election. The two are mutually exclusive and not in any way connected, as far as I can tell. Wanting to build a nice big hotel in Moscow versus getting a Moscow politician to help you win the election, how is that even remotely connected? I suppose you could say that Russia wants the Trump Tower a Trump Tower established there, and then that's like a favor for a favor. But it still seems mutually exclusive to me, for the most part. Bottom line is, I still say the Mueller probe's BS. And I suppose that it could be possible that that would preclude that there was, you know, like a favor for a favor sort of thing. Because establishing foreign business in another country does bring that country revenue. But it still seems, by and large, unrelated. Well, why do you need Russia's help when your opponent is Hillary Rodham Clinton, who I think even a lot of Democrats could see was a terrible, terrible choice? Moving on. Ukraine President Petro Poroshenko has been asking NATO to come defend Ukraine from Russia over the recent rising in tensions. I'm telling you, folks, Putin is pushing the possibility of war. He's pushing it pretty hard. There could be war between Russia and Ukraine. It could have a overall negative effect in the surrounding area. So I would not be surprised if we start hearing about war in the coming quarter of the year, if not by the first quarter of 2019. And then finally, Trump has added a new bump stock ban. A bump stock being an accessory that increases the rate of fire of semi-automatic rifles and guns, essentially making it fire at the same speed as a fully automatic. Yeah, you know, as long as you're not actually taking away the guns in our gun rights, as long as you're not doing that, we're good. If you take away some needless accessory, I mean, I think this is just another useless piece of legislation. Sometimes I wonder if Washington isn't just pushing out legislation just for the sake of it, you know? Adding legislation to the books just for the sake of having another piece of legislation. You know, this culture of legalism is what's created the giant nodding mess of red tape this country is encumbered by. What does this honestly do? Okay, this seems kind of useless to ban these. Because you know what? Doesn't mean just banning the bump stocks does not mean the bump stocks cease to exist. They're going to exist somewhere, and criminals are going to find them, steal them, and use them. Which would mean they would have bump stocks and we would not. Not that we need them, I'm just saying that the only thing this is going to do is take bump stocks away from honest citizens and not from criminals. In other words, useless. Completely useless. I mean, doesn't the president have something better to do with his time than push useless legislation that effectively accomplishes nothing of any significance? Maybe it says she should be explaining how building a Trump Tower in Russia should in no way preclude that he was in collusion with Vladimir Putin. Perhaps you can talk about that. I mean, I still kind of see it, again, as mutually exclusive. Kind of. But I also see the possibility that it could be favor for favor. Anyway, that's all, folks. That's all for the Unglobalist. Tschüss.